helping people cope with and overcome life's challenges. This is Life Transformations with Michael Hart, certified Christian counselor and director of Ottawa's Elam Counseling Services.
Hi, I'm Melissa Waggett, co-host of Life Transformation, and I want to thank you so much for joining us today for another exciting edition of Life Transformation. Life Transformation is a Christian counseling radio show where chains are broken and lives are transformed. And this show is part of the Elam Counseling Ministry. And with me in studio is Michael Hart, who's the director of Elam Counseling Service, which is a Christian counseling ministry here in Ottawa. If you're not familiar with Elam Counseling, you can learn more about us at www.elamcounselingministry.com, or you can always give us a call at 613-699-1677. Or if you're into social media, we also have a Twitter account and a Facebook page where you can reach out to us, and all that information can be found on our website. Elam is a counseling ministry that provides professional counseling, but from a Christian perspective to individuals, couples, and families at subsidized rates due to generous donations. And so, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Michael Hart, my co-host for today. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you very much, Melissa.
So excited to have you here as always.
It's my pleasure.
Another exciting show for us. Mm-hmm. And what we're going to be talking about today is something that maybe some people have experienced in their family members or their loved one, and sometimes truthfully it can be quite frightening. And these are the signs someone may be developing or in the middle of a mental illness. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I'm really interested to know from your perspective and the things you've seen in your own clinical practice, what people can look for in their friends, their family, and maybe give them some tips about what they can do if they start seeing these signs come up.
Absolutely, and we'll get into that. And let me say that one of my passion for the work that I do is helping people who are going through this kind of hardship. And a lot of time these people are in financial situations where they can't pay for counseling. They can't hold a job because they have mental health issues, or they have been let go from their job that they had because they started acting in bizarre way. And so a lot of times these people are in very adverse financial situation, and they need help, and there is just not enough resources out there to help these families who are going through these. And this is one of the reasons why we have structured our practice in such a way that we go by a sliding scale that is geared to people's income. So we have been doing this from the very inception of Elam Counseling Ministry. But recently we have made this official by getting our non-profit status. So Elam is now a non-profit organization, and we depend on donations to be able to continue to offer counseling to those families. So if you're listening to the show today and you have not yet donated to us, we would like you to consider making a donation to Elam Counseling Services so that we can continue to do the work that we do, to be able to pay our therapists and to be able to see people at the rate that they can afford. So mental illness is one of the conditions that often make people vulnerable financially and in a place where they need help but can't get it. And so that's why I wanted to do a show about that today, about what are some of the signs that people can look forward to know if their loved ones are going through developing a mental illness.
And so what are the common types of mental illness that you see in your clinical practice?
As one of the common mental illness that we see is, depression. There are people who have become very depressed to the point where they're not able to function anymore. We're talking about severe depression here. It's not just a feeling of having the blues. We're talking about depression to the point where they can't go to work, they can't get out of bed, and everything is such a hard task to do. So these people are now in a situation where they need help, and so they reach out to us at Elam for help. And I'm glad to say that we have been able to help a lot of people recover from situations like that. We also see families who have loved ones who are going through bipolar disorder, and a lot of these people who are going through bipolar, they are now acting in very bizarre ways that are very concerning to family members. We see people who are schizophrenic as well, and family members are having a hard time coming to grips with with dealing with their loved ones. But let me say that if you are listening to the show today and you're having a family members, that you can begin to identify any of these warning signs that we are going to talk about today, it's very important to get help sooner than later, because by getting help you can prevent the person from developing a much more severe case of whatever the disorder is. You can also prevent this disorder from becoming a lifetime issue in this person's life. The earlier you reach out for help, the earlier the treatment is put in place, the sooner this person will be able to recover and return to normal. Waiting too long has a number of risk factors associated with it. Risk of harm to the person's self, risk of harm to family members, and also risk that this person may have to deal with this mental illness for the rest of their lives. Let me say that we have a very good rate of people who have received healing from things such as schizophrenia, people who have been healed from bipolar disorder and those kind of mental illnesses, healing to the point where they're able to go back to work and function at very high capacity. And so it's not the end of the world if you have a family member who is showing signs. One of the things I can say and stress again is get help sooner than later.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's really part of the reason we do this show so much and try to bring awareness to these issues is because it's really getting across that mental illness is an illness. And in the same way you'd go to a doctor for a cold or a flu or a cancer treatment, if you're experiencing problems with your mental health, it's really important to get help. And as we'll discuss later too, mental illness affects everyone, whether it's yourself personally or a loved one or a friend. It's really important to reach out and get help. And sometimes I think in Christian circles, there's this perception that mental illness doesn't happen here, but it does too.
It does. And one of the dangers I see in Christian circles is we have a tendency to spiritualize the mental illness, where someone who has schizophrenia and they're acting in a bizarre way, instead of realizing that there is medical help that is needed, Christians sometimes spiritualize the issue and make it into a demonic issue. This person is hearing voices, demons are speaking to them, and so they take a spiritual approach where instead of getting help, it becomes, let us cast the demons out of this person, when in fact it's a medical issue. Now don't get me wrong, I do believe that demon possession exists, and I have seen people who have been demon possessed, but a lot of times I think when people automatically go to believing that their loved ones are demon possessed instead of that they're dealing with a mental illness, I think this sometimes lead to very, very tragic mistakes where the person condition worsens and they have deliverance after deliverance only to see the person becomes worse each time. And if they are trying a spiritual solution and it's not working, there is nothing wrong in saying that this person, it's probably a medical case and this person needs help. One of the first things that I do when someone comes in or acting in bizarre way, I do a spiritual assessment to see if this person is involved in any kind of spiritual beliefs or spiritual involvement that would make them susceptible to demons. So if you do an assessment with a person, this person, they are not involved with the Ouija board, they are not involved in the occult, and there is no kind of door that you see that this person has opened in their life for the occult, then I think it's a good basis to begin to suspect that you might be dealing with a mental problem. And if this be the case, a mental problem, it requires a medical solution.
And so you've alluded to a few times here the medical solution to these types of illnesses. What is the medical solution that often these patients need? Recognizing that every patient's different and every condition's different and all those things. But what's a typical thing a patient can expect?
I think the best approach to dealing with mental illness is what I call, it's actually a two-pronged approach from the medical perspective, where there has to be medication involved with a lot of these cases such as schizophrenia, people who are bipolar, a lot of time people who are severely depressed needs depression medication. And so it has to be a two-pronged approach, medication and also therapy. And so we see very good results from people who come to see us who are on medication and they're doing therapy as well. These people are able to put the tools that we give them in place because the medication helps them to be able to think rationally. If they come in and they're in a state where their reality is totally skewed, they don't have a sense of what's real and what's not, then talk therapy is not going to help if you start talk therapy right away. So there are some people who have come in, their family members have brought them in, and just after the first session, I would say this person needs to get medical help right away before the treatment can begin. And when these people do get medical help, so they start taking medication and then they are doing therapy at the same time, what we find is that they're better able to cope with the stresses of life, and they have the tools and the resources necessary to prevent them from having another psychotic episode, and also the tools to help them to get over the situation that they have come in with. And we see very good results where people who have been bipolar or schizophrenic, they're able to return to work and they do very well because they have now received the tools to help them. And the research also shows that there is a better outcome for people who are doing both psychotherapy and taking medication than people who just do either one without the other.
So it's really important to that holistic dual prong approach.
Absolutely. If you've just joined us, sorry, go ahead.
Just for success.
Yes, absolutely. If you have just joined us, you're listening to the Life Transformation Radio Show, and I'm your host, Michael Hart of Elim Counseling Services. Elim is a Christian counseling organization that offers professional counseling from a Christian perspective for a wide variety of mental health and relationship issues. You can find out more about us by visiting our website at elimcounselingministry.com. Elim is spelled E-L-I-M, counseling with 2 L's, ministry.com. You can also call us at 613-699-1677. Or you can tweet to us by visiting our social media links on our website, as I have said, at elimcounselingministry.com. And today we are discussing mental illness. In particular, what are some of the common warning signs of mental illness?
And so on that note, I was wondering if you could give us a little bit of an introduction to what are some common signs that family members or friends may see in someone who may be in the early stages of a mental illness.
If there is someone you have in your family who is usually articulate and can express themselves very well, and you're beginning to see that your loved one is now talking in a jumbled manner, and they're talking about many different things at the same time, and their trend of thought, they can't seem to keep their trend of thought together. They start with one subject and they finish with another subject, and it's just a lot more jumbled than they were before. There's a change, that is. Then you can begin to suspect that might be a sign that there is something happening mentally with the person that might need to be attended to. And notice that I say that this has to be a change. If there is someone that usually stutters or usually have problems expressing themselves, then this does not necessarily mean that there is a mental issue there. It could just be that the person has difficulty with language. But if there is a change where your loved one is gone from being able to express to talking in fragmented ways and to saying things that is very hard to understand, then you can be sure that there's something mentally going on there.
Do you ever see sometimes a change in rate of speech? Like someone with they get really frantic and they talk really, really fast, like that kind of
absolutely.
Cadence change
Rate
too?
of speech, significant change in rate of speech can also be a sign. And if we see that where the person is talking in a very slurred way or they're talking very rapidly, there's a significant change in the pace that the person would talk at, then it's good to begin to suspect and to keep an eye out to say, is there something going on with my loved one, and do I need to take action?
And so what are some other signs that people may exhibit?
Well, the speech is one thing, but I think also the content of the speech can be another. And some of the content of speech that can be a sign that the person is having a mental health issue is when they're saying things that are bizarre. If this person is making claims that they're someone very special, or if they are accusing others in the household of bizarre things that is obviously not true, then the content of that speech can begin to show that there might be something wrong. For people who have spiritual beliefs, when they begin to develop mental health issues, it usually takes a spiritual form. So a loved one can begin to make claim that there's some special prophet from the Old Testament, or they have some very special revelation from God that the whole world needs to hear, and they start acting in a bizarre way. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that every time someone says that this is happening, they have a mental illness. You're looking for other signs of change as well. It's not just any one thing. It's usually a combination of things that you begin to say, wait a minute here, there is something going on. So the content of speech is very, very important to take a look at and begin to see, ask yourself, does this seem like there is something very irrational and strange going on with my loved one?
So we've touched on a few signs so far. How do you find families react when they start to see these signs? What's a common type of reaction that you see in your practice?
The very common reaction usually is denial. Because family who come into my office, it's usually at the point where the person has now had a psychotic episode, and they have been to the Royal Ottawa, and they're now discharged from the Royal Ottawa, and they need to get ongoing psychotherapy treatment to be able to cope with life. So a lot of these families who have gone through that, they usually will say to me, like, we should have known. This person was showing signs a long time ago, but it was just very hard for us to believe at the time, but we should have known that that there was something wrong. So changing speech and changing the personality of the person is some of what these families would see. It's another sign that they would see. This person went from being a very easy to get along with person to suddenly they're accusing everyone in the house, they're suspicious of everyone in the house, they can't get along, they're very irritable. When you begin to see signs like that, then I think it's very important to act right away. Many of these families live with regret that we didn't do something earlier before it got to the point where there was a psychotic breakdown.
So you mentioned denial is one reason they don't act. What are other reasons where I know hindsight's always 20/20, and it's really great when you're through a situation to look back and be like, oh, woulda, shoulda, coulda.
Yes.
What are other reasons they don't seek help?
I think for some family, it's the resistance of the person who is going through the mental illness. Unfortunately, our system is structured in such a way that you can force someone to get medical help if they refuse. So a lot of times for these families who realize that there's a problem and is saying there is a problem, we need to get help. Unfortunately, if the loved one refuses to get help, and if they're of age where they can legally say, I don't want to be treated, that's over 18, then there's very little a family member can do. So family members sometimes feel that their hands are tied, they can't do anything, so they just go along. Some of these family members, they don't do anything out of fear of offending the loved one. Because if I were to suggest that this person needs medical help, then this person might take it as an insult. So there is talk behind the person's back. There is a suspicion that there is something is off with the person. But out of fear of offending the person, family members keep silent and allow the condition to worsen. So let me say this, that there are things that you can do, techniques that you can use to help if you're a situation developing. I think one thing you can do is to wait for what I call lucid moments to have this talk with the person, because these people are sometimes have moments of clarity where they are not exhibiting strange behavior. right? There are moments when they're acting very normal. The mistake that families make is that they often want to confront the person when they're acting out, to say, you're acting strange, you need help, can't you see that or your acting is wrong? The truth is they can't see it because they're not thinking rationally.
Exactly, and their mind is foggy. I remember asking someone once, actually, if they were hearing voices that weren't there. And the person actually very astutely responded to me and said, well, if I'm hearing them, how would I know they're not there? But it speaks to that point where you're in those acute, someone's in that acute state.
Yes.
It's real. It's as real as you sitting across the table from me.
Yes.
And so to interact with them at that point and say, look, this is not on, they are not there, and they're not in that spot to receive,
right.
And they're maybe they're not balanced, they've not started therapy or meds, you're not going to get very far.
Absolutely.
So if someone sees that lucid moment, what do they do?
Okay, so when there is this lucid moment, this person is thinking clearly, they are not acting irrationally, that's the time when you go to them and you said, there is something I want to talk to you about. The incident that happened on Saturday night when you accused your dad of trying to poison you, for example, or you said that you saw something on the wall. Do you remember that incident? Let us talk about it. A lot of times people are beginning to realize that they're acting strange themselves and they're afraid to face it. But if you confront them at a time when there is clarity, they are more likely to be able to talk about it rationally and to say, yes, sometimes they might forget what they have done. But if you're able to say, yes, you did this, you accused your dad of this, you actually was violent towards your sister, and you tried to hit your mom. And if you begin to talk to them when they're calm and in a place to receive it, it's much more effective than becoming angry or telling them that they need help when they're actually exhibiting signs. Sometimes to find family members, you had asked me earlier, what are some of the reasons why family members don't get help? Sometimes family members become very angry at the person who is acting out, and they don't really realize that it's a mental illness. They think that the person has just become this mean person, and so they're very angry at the person. They have sort of just given up on the person and just left the person to their own demise, instead of saying, I am not going to take this personally. Like a mother who was accused of trying to poison her son. Like, she would make these lovely meals for him, and she has been doing that since he was a baby. He got to a stage where he started developing a mental illness, and he thought his mom was trying to poison him. Now, if she were to take this personally and to say, well, how dare you accuse me, I am your mom, then she might develop some kind of resentment towards him where she doesn't seek to get help. But if you can step back as a family member or as family members and realize that in your loved one's mind it is real, they think it's actually happening. To them it's real, and hating them or being angry at them is going to help. You need to try to come up with a way of helping them to see when they're calmer that they need to get medical help.
What do you suggest for those situations where there may not be those lucid periods and the person's in, I don't know, an acute psychosis, and the lucid period just isn't there? What should family members do then?
Family members should still try to get help for the person. I know it's very hard because if the person is unwilling and to get help, unfortunately there's not much you can do until they hit rock bottom and they have to be forcibly taken into the Royal Ottawa by the police or by family members. So in those cases, it's very, very difficult because the way the system is set up in Canada, you can't force someone to take medication or to get help if they refuse to. So family members sometimes feel as if their hands are tied if the person refuses to get help. And it can be very, very difficult because it's almost you have to wait until a person becomes suicidal, for example, and threatens to kill themselves to say, well, now it's an emergency. This person has to...
And they can be committed then because they're going to be hurting themselves, or if they say they're going to hurt someone else.
Or they started threatening family members, and then you can get the cops to intervene to take them in. And then that's usually a very difficult situation for family members to have to do that to a loved one.
So are there any other signs maybe that we haven't talked about thus far that people could look for in their family members and maybe be a sign we should start taking some action?
Absolutely. So some of the other common signs that we see is social withdrawal. Like if a person is usually very, very sociable, they have friends, and you notice that there is a change where now they stop interacting with friends. They become very withdrawn from family members. They're usually outgoing. They like to go out on a Saturday night with their friends, and they have a circle of friends, and for no known reason this person begins to withdraw from family and from friends. Then you can begin to suspect that there is something going on. There's a mental health issue going on. I would say to family members in that case, once you see that happening, if the person is withdrawing, don't wait for them to become totally detached before trying to intervene. Try to go in the person's room, knock, go in, sit with the person, talk with the person, try to find out what's happening, how they're feeling, and encourage them to get help if you see this along with other signs. Another sign that is very common is that there is a decrease in the person's level of functioning. Mm-hmm. If you have a child and you're listening to this show today, and this child goes from getting very good grades to finding it very difficult to cope in school, and there's just a falling grades, and they're not functioning, tasks that were very easy for them to do at home, for example, they can't do those tasks anymore, then those are signs that there could be a mental illness issue there. We can also talk about rapid shifts of feelings and emotions. People who go from extremes of happiness one moment, they're very happy, jovial, the next minute they're crying and the world is falling apart, and then they're happy again. If those things begin to happen, we can usually suspect that, or you should suspect that there is a mental health issue happening there. Let me reiterate again that no one sign in itself is usually a sign. It's usually a combination of signs that you look for. And again, let me reiterate that you're looking for change. If someone hasn't been sociable and tend to be a recluse, that doesn't mean that the person has mental health issues. But you're looking for a change where there's a change in the person's personality.
So with the time we have left, we've alluded to some throughout the show. What can people do if they're starting to see these signs?
If they're beginning to see these signs in your family member, I think one of the things you can do, if you are not familiar with if you don't know what to do, is you can meet with a therapist, begin to talk with a therapist about what to do in the case of your family members. Therapists are usually trained to help you to know how to confront the situation. Therapists are usually very good too in recommending resources that you can use, techniques that you can use, and I think that would be a very good sign. I think also, as we have said before, it's better to confront sooner or later. So unfortunately, we have come to the end of today's show, but I think we have touched on a number of things here that if you're listening and you see those signs, you should begin to get help. Thank you very much for listening to this edition of the Life Transformation Radio Show, and thank you very much, Melissa, for your questions and for helping us discuss this issue. Until next time, this is your host, Michael Hart of Elim Counselling Services. I'm praying that God would bless you in all your relationships and keep you sound in mind and pure in heart.